Good morning, everybody. Dr. Amber here, clinical psychologist, and today I want to talk about how to ensure your kids will always want to come home. This is an interesting topic that I wanted to talk about today. One, because of a conversation that I had with my son last night at dinner, which I'll explain to you about, but also this is a really big parenting. I don't know if I want to call it a fear of mine or just, you know how sometimes we have these things in our head. I guess it is a fear. I often have a fear that when my kids get older, they may not want to come back home. And I have reasons for why I have that fear, which we might talk about a little bit as well. But this is what I want to talk about today. How do we ensure that our kids will always want to be here, always want to come home, even if realistically they can't, right? Because we know that as kids get older, they have different interests, they need to explore different environments. Probably the same for you all too. I would bet that you're not living at home with your parents right now. And if you are, things happen, but for most of you, I'm sure that there was a process in your life where you needed to go off and explore other environments, other people, other places, and we often have to leave our families to do it. But you still want your children to feel like, that is still home, and I always know I can go back to my parents, I can go back to my family, and I belong there, right? So I'll start it off with a story. But first, if you're new here, again, I'm Dr. Amber. I'm a clinical psychologist. And typically when I'm online, I'm talking about reflections around parenthood, motherhood. I have a new book coming out in the summertime called A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation. And that book is all about helping parents just like you to learn how to self-regulate. So that means emotional regulation, physical regulation. It means cognitive regulation. Really learning how to regulate so that your inability to regulate or your dysregulated moments are not interfering with your relationship with your children. That's what we want. And we also want to be able to show our kids how to emotionally regulate themselves, right? You can't do that if you don't know how to do it for yourself. So that is why that book is so important. And if you feel like you need that book or want that book, pre-order your copy. The link is in my bio. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Precious. Good morning. I'm going to read this comment real quick. This video just popped up in my screen. Come home, girl. Goodbye. Leave. Oh, what? Okay. Maybe you shouldn't be in this live. I'm not gonna read your comment out loud, but I understand the sentiment. Basically what this person commented is that she's like, girl, bye. Leave those kids out there. You raised them already. It's your time. You need a hobby. Leave those kids alone. And I would say that I'm coming at this from a different angle, right? Because I feel like that comment is very much reflective of someone who maybe hasn't taken the time to do that for themselves while their kids are in their home. And so this is a different spin, because if you listen to my lives, you understand where I'm coming from. I'm always an advocate for, yes, build your identity now. Do the things you need to do because you're still a human. But come on, as a parent, you still want your kids to love you and to want to feel like they have a place in your home. And so, yeah, that energy is not what we're doing here. It's this live is not the energy of, girl, them kids, they can leave. Now you can do you, because I've been doing me even when my kids are here. And so that's not the energy that I'm going to have with my kids are grown. Yes, I want them to explore. I do want them to leave this area. I do want them to go live in other places because I know how valuable that was for me. But it will never be, ooh, I'm done raising my kids. Now I can live my life, because I'm actively living my life now. So yeah, that person, hopefully she's not still in this live, because that's definitely not the energy that we want here. Yeah, someone else commented, some people can't wait to get their kids away from him, and that's not the energy we have here. It's not the energy we have here. It's not. And so granted, I also understand moments, like in the moment when you feel like, oh my God, I need space and I would give anything to have my kids just go away for a little bit, right? That's why and how I ended up writing the book that I wrote, because oftentimes we do find ourselves feeling overwhelmed, overstimulated, dysregulated, not comfortable, not tapped into ourselves, and we just need a break. But to keep that energy forever, and then also when your kids are grown, to be like, I'm done, please leave, go away forever. Absolutely not. Girl, bye. I'm sorry. No, I don't know. That's not the energy here. So this live is for the people who are realistic about the fact that parenting is hard, being a mom is hard. Yes, there are moments where you do want your kids to go away, but at the end of the fucking day, you love your kids, you want your kids to be around, you want them to grow up and become adults who are well-rounded and secure and able to explore and feel comfortable leaving home, while also knowing that home is still a place that they can come to when they want to and when they need to. Right? I mean, come on. You know, let me get back to my story. Y'all, let me get back to my story. My story is this. Last night, I was eating dinner with my family, okay? Because I love them. Also, this is another story for another day. We actually just started eating dinner as a family. We've been doing it for like 2 weeks. Prior to this, we have not been eating dinner as a family. And I want to share that in another space, maybe on the podcast or another live another day. But for about 2 weeks now, we've been intentionally eating dinner at the table as a family, right? And it's been good. It's been surprisingly very pleasant. And so we're eating dinner together. And last night I was just talking to, the kids and my husband and just saying how, like, I'm really enjoying this moment. I'm that mom where I often will, if there's a moment we're having all together, I'll get all like, you guys, this is a good moment. I love this. We're amazing. They know that's who I am. My husband knows too. He'll always roll his eyes, but I know he appreciates it. So I did that. And, I was just saying out loud, like, you guys, I'm just so glad we get to eat dinner together. This is awesome. So we start talking about our day. And I don't even know how we got onto this topic of talking about how in the future we may not eat dinner all the time together. And so my son asked why, and my son is 4. And so I explained to him that, when you and Eden get older, you all will probably become teenagers. There might be days where you want to go eat dinner with your friends. There might be times where you have other activities you might have to do in the evenings. But also, when you become a grown-up, you may not live here. And so we're generally talking about that in a way that toddlers might understand. And he said, I'm going to always live here. And I was like, you sure? You're going to live here forever? He was like, yeah. And then he was like, in a very 4-year-old way, he was like, well, I'll have a car, and so I can drive myself to my own doctor's appointments, and I can drive you places too, but I'm going to live here. And I was just like, oh, you want to live here? He was like, yeah, because I love you guys. It was the sweetest thing. It was the sweetest thing, the most innocent, sweetest thing. And then he and my daughter, they both started to talk to each other about how if they do leave, they're going to live together. So it was just like a very precious and sweet moment. But for me, it definitely tapped on to this parenting fear of mine that for whatever reason, my kids one day may not want to come back home, or they may not want to be here forever, or they may not feel that same connection to home. And I will be transparent today and say I think that fear comes from a place of myself feeling at some points in my life as an adolescent, as a young adult, that there were times where I didn't feel like home is where I wanted to be. There were times where I left home and I felt relieved, and I didn't want to go back. And again, that's another live for another day. That's probably another book for another decade that I might write one day. But I think there were a lot of things that happened in my life as a teenager, as a child, and I'm sure that you all can relate to this, where you maybe didn't feel seen, you maybe didn't feel heard, you maybe felt like your voice wasn't valued, and so it may have just not felt like a space where you felt you could grow and you could really be who you really are. And that was my experience. And so because that was my experience, I have developed this fear or this worry that as my kids age, they won't want to come back home. So what does that mean, right? If you have this fear, or I myself am having this fear that I am constantly trying to manage in motherhood and as a parent, what do we do with that? Because as we know, as parents, there are going to be so many fears. And if this isn't your fear today, I assure you, you probably have another fear somewhere where you're like, oh my gosh, there's this fear that I have about my kids or my relationship with my kids or how they view me, or there's some sort of fear that you have as a parent that you have to learn how to manage, because our fears in parenthood can really interfere with your ability to be a whole, secure, optimally functioning parent if we don't address those fears. So that's why it's so important to learn, how do I manage and cope any of the fears or the worries or concerns I have around parenting? Because if you don't, you will start to operate as if that fear is actually happening, or you will overcompensate in a way that could stress and strain your ability to parent, but then also your ability to be present with your kids, right? So that's why it's so important. We have to address any fears that we have with regard to parenting, or our relationship with our kids. We can't just let those fears and worries go unmanaged and unaddressed, because they will wreak havoc on your ability to parent, but then also your relationship with your kids. And you don't want that. You don't want that. And so I imagine for me, the strange fear that I have that my kids won't want to come home, or that my kids won't want to feel connected to home. If I didn't manage that or address that fear, I would probably be overcompensating all the time in parenthood. I probably would be hesitant to set boundaries with the kids or limits with the kids, because I would be so afraid, like, oh, if I'm too harsh, or if I upset them, then they won't want to come back. And that's just not true, right? So it's like, how do you manage? Yes, I want my kids to always feel like home is home. I want my kids to always want to be here. And at the same time, there's going to be moments or things that I do that will upset my kids. My kids will not always be happy with me. My kids may become upset with me. There might be something I have to do as a parent to set a boundary or a limit or a consequence for something that they won't like. And, we often talk about toddlers, but also, especially as teens, there are years for parents with teenagers, and I don't know this from personal experience, but professionally with working with families with teenagers, there could be years when it feels like your relationship with your teen is just out of whack, right? But you just have to remember and keep in context that the way that our relationship is functioning with my teenager is really a reflection of how they are changing, how they are individuating, how they are seeing the world differently, right? So those are the things we just have to accept and expect as parents. Like, there's going to be a time where my kid is upset with me. There's going to be a time where there's going to be conflict between us. But how do I not internalize that and then make me more fearful about parenting or fearful about our relationship, right? So for me personally, how I have been trying to really manage my own fear around, will my kids want to come back home when they become adults? Will my kids always want to be here? Will my kids, love home and feel comfortable at home? And so with that fear, it made me just kind of step back and think, okay, what are the things that make people feel comfortable? What are the things that make people feel at home? What are the things that make people feel like they belong? What are the things that make people feel seen and validated? Whatever those things are, those are the things that I want to be implementing into my relationship with my kids, but then also into the dynamics of our home and our family life, right? So for instance, many people don't want to be in spaces where they feel unseen and unheard. Many people don't want to be in spaces where they feel like their feelings are not validated. Many people don't want to be in spaces where they feel like they are attacked for just being who they are. And however, though, many of us have grown up in families where doing that to children is just the norm, right? I would say that for many of us, our parents operated with this mindset of kids are supposed to be seen and not heard, right? We don't care what kids have to say because it doesn't matter. You're a kid. You don't know anything. Like, I don't care about your feelings. You're not tired because you haven't worked a full day. I think that is probably what many of our parents went through as children. And so thinking about how that then impacted their parenting and then how it also impacted us, right? But now us as parents in 2024, we're realizing, oh, kids are little humans. And they do have feelings. They have very big feelings. They do want to be seen, and they also need to be heard. No longer can it be just, oh, it's my way and I don't care about what you think. These kids have thoughts. These kids have feelings. These kids have opinions. These kids have perspectives. Why would they want to be in a place where they are not seen and heard for who they are becoming? Right? And so for me, when that clicked for me as a parent, it's like, okay, if I want my kids to always feel like home is home, even if they are like growing up, living in all these other places, I want that for them. But I always want to feel like my kids know they can come home. That means this home has to be open. This home has to be welcoming. This home has to be nurturing. This home has to be respectful of who they are, even in their worst moments. This home has to validate their feelings and their big emotions, right? Like, that's the things, those are the ingredients that need to be put into the home to then have your kids want to stay or want to return, want to feel connected, right? Or even think about the perspective of like, you know, as adults, right? I believe that our relationships with people change, our friendships with people change, and you probably have a handful of friendships, if you're lucky, that stand the test of time in terms of we've been friends for 20 years and I still want to commit to this friendship, right? What are the reasons why you continue to commit to that friendship? What are the reasons why you want to continue to connect with that person? There's probably some sort of ingredient in that relationship dynamic that feels fulfilling, that feels sustaining, that feels reciprocal, right? And so we have to think about that with our kids too. Families grow and evolve, sometimes together, but also apart or in different ways. So what are going to be the ingredients that ensure that as I grow as a mom, as my family grows as a family, as my kids grow into adults and people who are their own individual people, what are going to be the things that keep them wanting to be connected? Like, I just think that is so important because you would be surprised, and probably not if this is you, but how many adults no longer feel connected to their families. And I think that is just sad, and it's something that we can be thinking about, especially now as a generation of parents who are thinking about emotional regulation and emotional well-being. We're thinking about how do we ensure that our own shit is not impacting our kids. We're thinking about mental health. We're thinking about all these things. So I feel like we are working with the tools and we're working with the ingredients that can help facilitate families that can be connected in a much deeper way, in a much more satisfying way. It actually makes me go back to the commenter in this earlier, in the same live earlier, that basically commented, hey, when my kids are grown, they can get their asses out the house and I don't care about them no more. That breaks my heart. Like, I cannot believe that's how someone feels, but that's the reality. Like, that's how she feels. Her perspective is when my kids are grown is deuces, get the fuck out my house. But I just feel like that we right now, people who are parenting in 2024, there are so many other tools and there's so many other things we have at our disposal to hopefully not get to the point where we're feeling like that, but then also never getting to a place where our kids feel that we feel that way, right? Like, I just don't want that. I don't want that for me, and I don't want that for you all too. So something else that I am working on, if you all follow me, you know that I've been working on this and talking about this a ton. Self-regulation as a parent, emotional regulation as a parent. How is it that my kids will want to stay connected with me, to me as their mom, if I am constantly snapping, reacting harshly, not being able to be present, cannot even focus in the moment because I've got this and this and that going off in my head and I can't even hear my kids, right? And this idea of self-regulation as a parent is like, it's not the intentional type of disrespect or the intentional type of I don't see my kids that we first talked about, but this is more like, it's more subtle, it's more unintentional. It's like, well, I can't see my kids, I can't validate my kids, I can't be present with my kids, not because I don't want to, but because I'm having trouble regulating myself around my kids. I'm having trouble managing how overstimulated I feel. I'm having trouble managing how overwhelmed I feel. And so, funny enough, that the inability to cope with your environment as a parent, the inability to cope with the big feelings that you have or that can be triggered as a parent, the inability to cope with overwhelm, overstimulation, dysregulation can have a similar effect to that mindset of, well, kids don't need to be seen, kids don't need to be heard. And it's really just because if you are so dysregulated, you cannot attend to and focus on all the things around you as a parent. Because let's be real, we're parents. And so we got this, we got that going on. Many of us work full time. We have so many responsibilities. And still, at the end of a long day, y'all, our kids will still want to play puzzles. And I'm like, my brain, I just want to sit. But it's like your kids still want to connect. Your kids still want to interact. They don't care if you're dysregulated. So it's like, okay, how do I ensure that I'm working on that other part? Right? How do I ensure that I'm working on my ability to emotionally regulate so that if I've had a very frustrating day at work, I don't bring that shit home? How do I work on being present in the moment? Because yes, I have 1,000 things to do going off in my head, but my kids just want me to sit down and play Legos right now. How do I manage all those other things happening around you when in the moment, connection with your kid may matter most? And that is why I wrote the book, A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation, because for me, I noticed that the thing that might eventually lead me to a point where my kids don't want to return was my inability to manage my big feelings and my big emotions and my big unreasonable reactions. I have a post that's pinned to my account where I told a story of how my son was playing with a plunger in the bathroom and I flipped the fuck out because it disgusted me. It made me frustrated because I'm like, why are you playing with the plunger anyways? But also he was 4. Kids do stuff like that. And so because I could not manage the frustration and disgust that I felt in the moment, I had a huge overreaction that actually ended up scaring him. So if I continue to do things like that, no, he's not going to want to come back home when he's 19. No, he's not going to want to return home when he's 30. Because those are going to be the early memories that are planted for him with regard to our relationship. And that's not what I want. And so writing this book, I had that event in my mind the entire time, because for me, it was like, if I don't get a handle on how I am reacting when I feel frustrated, when I feel anxious, when I feel afraid, when I feel disappointed, when I feel bored, if I don't get a handle on how I react when I feel certain feelings, it will interfere with my relationship with my kids. And it also might for you as well. So if you feel like you might be struggling with how to regulate your feelings, your emotions, how to be present with your kids despite the 1,000 other things you have going on, I know that the book can be helpful for you, because you probably are someone who wants to be connected to your kids. You're probably someone who wants to help your kids feel seen and heard in your home. You want your kids to function and to be emotionally healthy. You want them to be connected to you. And I know that our inability to regulate ourselves, our inability to self-regulate can spill over into these disruptions and ruptures in our relationship with our kids, and I don't want that for you. So I want my kids to come home when they become adults. No, I don't want them to live in my house forever. But if they need to, they always have a place here. I want them to always call. I want them to always feel like this is where they can come and be themselves. I always want them to know I can call mommy no matter what's going on. And this is what I'm doing to ensure that they will always feel that way. I am working on how to become a self-regulated parent so that my big reactions, my big feelings, my big emotions, my potential lack of capacity because of the 1,000 other things I have going on won't interfere with my relationship with my kids. So if you feel that way as well, I hope you do pre-order your copy of the new book, A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation, because I think it could be helpful for you. And thank you for listening today. I appreciate this. I love these lives. I love when I get to pop on and talk to you all. I'm going to go back through and read any more messages or comments. So going back, I hate that we're now using that early commenter as an example, but I think she brought it on herself. Like, come on. But someone said, then the tables turn. When she's older, the kids won't want to take care of her. We might have to talk about that one day, because I have a lot of thoughts about, like, okay, so what I would say about that is this. I think that, back in the day, there was this obligation that many of us, or maybe like past generations, felt towards family. It's like, no matter how bad your family treated you, no matter how bad your experience was with your family, blood is thicker than water. Family is everything. And so there was this sense of obligation, like you always have to do such and such for your family, right? I think as generations have passed and we've evolved and our ideas of mental health have changed, our ideas of like relationship and family have changed, I think many of us now kind of take a stance of, to say it, because I can't think of another professional way to say it, I'm going to give my family the same energy they've been giving me. I'm going to give, I think many of us kind of have come to that, right? Because we understand boundaries now. We understand mental health. We understand how some unhealthy family dynamics have interfered with our ability to be healthy and whole. And so if you've raised your kids this whole time with this mentality of like, I cannot wait till y'all get out of my house. I cannot wait. I don't want to take care of you no more. I can't wait to get back to myself. Are they going to want to take care of you when you get older and you need help? They may not. They may not. And I wouldn't blame them, because gone are the days where it's like, oh, that's your mom, you got to do. You don't. So yeah, I don't wish that on her, but it could happen. It could happen. Because that's real. I mean, there was something else I was going to say and I completely forgot. What was it? I hope it comes back to me. What was it I was talking about? It'll come back to me. I'm getting old, my brain. One more comment says, same, and I commend you for thinking, for your thinking style while they're young and making it. That was what I was going to say. So the commenter said, I commend you for your thinking style while they're young and making it your parental intention. So what I wanted to say is this. I love that now as parents, and especially moms, we are talking more about how do you actually integrate yourself in the process of being a mom, because I think in the past being a mom meant complete erasure of your desires, of your needs, of the things that bring you joy, of basically anything that didn't involve your kids and family, because it was like being a mom meant completely letting go of that. And now, sacrificing yourself, your identity, and just being all about your kids and your family. What I have found is that women who have maybe been forced to do that, or maybe who grew up in an era where that was motherhood, there tends to be more resentment, more anger, and more frustration as their kids age, because it is kind of like a boiling point of like, I just cannot wait for y'all to get out of my house so I can finally get back to myself. But now that the concepts and ideas around motherhood have changed, we see that, guess what? We actually can still be ourselves while being moms. Yes, it's hard because there is this process of matrescence, right? Like the process of becoming a mother. It can make you feel like you do have to erase yourself. You do have to let go of all of your things that you love and bring you joy. It makes you feel that way, but the goal is to eventually come to a place where you're like, okay, I've solidified my identity as a mom, and now I'm ready to get back to these things, and it doesn't have to be 20 years out. Maybe it'll take 1 year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years. But I think the point of matrescence is to learn how to become a mom while also still integrating and holding on to or embracing the ways that you will be evolving. So I don't anticipate that when my kids are 20, in their 20s, I'm going to feel resentful and ready for them to get out of the house, because I've been tending to my needs. I've been aware of my desires. I have been pursuing the things that bring me joy, even as a mom. And that is the point. Like, yes, I'm a mom, but I'm all these other things too. And we have to create a space or a way to be able to tap into all of that so that you don't be ready to kick your kids out when they're not even ready. Right? And so, no, we don't want to be resentful and just so ready to kick our kids out of the house because we've been deprived for the last 20 some years of the things that bring us joy. Do those things today. Do those things now. Is it challenging? Yes, but find a way. And if you continue to follow me, I will help you find those ways, because I've talked about this for years. Actually, go to my podcast. Before I rebranded the podcast was Balanced Working Mama Podcast. I have 100 episodes of podcast content for how to balance your life. And eventually, you all, guess what? After the book drops, maybe next year, we're going to come back to this idea of balance and motherhood, because I do think it's still so relevant. If you don't find the balance in motherhood, and no, the balance isn't going to be perfect, but if you don't find that balance, you will become that person who comes into the live comments talking about, man, fuck that shit. As soon as the kids are grown, they're out my house because I'm tired of these kids. Ma'am. Ma'am. I think that just means that something happened where you weren't able to connect with yourself in the process of motherhood. And I hate that for you. But guess what? We're going to be working on doing that so we don't become that. Okay? That's where I'm at on that. That's where I'm at on that. And then I'm going to go. Okay, one more comment. It's hard out here. If my kids want to stay with me until they can afford to buy a home, they can stay with me. Yes. Absolutely. Y'all, again, another topic for another day, because I just think this is so layered. But I just think that many of us are very familiar with those experiences of, like, if it didn't happen to us, we know someone else it happened to, where, you know, someone became close to adulthood, but their family was so ready to kick them out because, you know, you're 16 now, go get a job, go do this, go do that. 16, 17, their frontal lobe still isn't developed. And so, like, I think sometimes because of societal pressures, like lack of resources, low capacity, sometimes families are very quick to kick the kids out. And it's like, for me, I think I'm so blessed. And it's a privilege to feel like your kid can stay with you forever as long as you want, right? But that's how I feel too. It's like, hey, you're not ready because it's hard out there? Sure, you always have a place here at home. Do I want you to go explore and find your own? Absolutely, because I know that that'll help you become an even better adult, a better human. You know, you'll be more equipped to do things. But until you're ready, guess what, baby girl? My son, y'all can stay here, okay? Like, that's how I feel too. All right, y'all. This was a great conversation. please feel free to continue to join me weekly. I usually pop on live once a week to chat on here about all types of things. But if you enjoyed this, you'll probably enjoy the others. Also, if you enjoyed this conversation, you'll probably enjoy my podcast, Dr. Amber's Know and Grow podcast. You can find that anywhere, including on YouTube. And then lastly, of course, if some of the things resonated with you today, I highly encourage you to pre-order my new book, A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation, a practical framework for breaking the cycle of dysregulation and mastering emotions for parents and children. I am trying to practice saying that whole title because I know in the coming months, I'm going to have to promote the book even more, and I'm going to need to remember the whole title. It is a long title, but that was the whole title, and that was me practicing it for you. So again, go pre-order your copy of the book, subscribe to the podcast, and then join me for another live next week. Thank you all. Have a great day.